Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we have a challenge on our hands over here, but good morning. So I've taken a little bit of a liberty with the title in how to present this. And I wanted to really just change it a little bit and say, I put a few bullets in here around how to grow a business and then using London. So I've just captured a few thoughts around that, and maybe a slightly different to the way the title is put forward, but hopefully the liberty will be worth it. So thank you for the very warm welcome. I'm going to cover a couple of things. I think you've already done the introduction to David, but maybe just give you a couple of things on that. I want to touch a little bit on Box's journey line. We've been here now in London for about 3 years. I'll touch on that. And then I really want to approach the discussion from looking at the world we're trying to tackle when building the business. And then just give 5 straightforward tips on what I think you need to do when setting up a business from scratch, and specifically how London helps us do that. So you already heard this, but I guess the way I would characterize my career is I've now gone through 2 IPOs. I've gone through 4 trade exits in ascending value of order from 2.2 billion to 4.5 billion to 7.8 billion. I've actually seen some interesting successes. I've been on the other end of acquisition as well. When I was at Nortel, we acquired 22 companies in 2 years. At HP, we had the pleasure of acquiring a little company called Opsware. For those who don't know, that was Ben Horowitz's company. If you know Andreessen Horowitz, one of the hottest VCs in the Valley, and had the pleasure of working with him for a couple of years. And then the final acquisition we did just before I left HP was the acquisition of EDS, which was interesting for many reasons, but the sheer scale of it in doubling the employee base of a company as big as HP was what made it interesting for me. So who's Box? I put a few pictures in here, so hopefully it'll give you a flavor of the company. That was the early stage of Box in the very beginning. For I was going to say graduates, they didn't graduate, they dropped out of college and set up Box. That was the original Box headquarters. Grew over the period of the last 10 years. This was the opening of our London office here. It was a great pleasure to have His Royal Highness open it. And Box as a company really started out to be a consumer company. We were working with millions of users around the globe on a huge volume basis, and we had a huge base of freemium users. After the first 3 years of operation, we then started to be a company that's tackling the enterprise, and from then on, that's been our big focus. And today, really, we are focused on some of the largest enterprise, all the way through to some of the smallest. So we have customers with literally 4 employees, up to GE that would have 300,000 employees using Box. We have some really interesting customers in Europe, Eurostar, Network Rail. We also work with people like SKF across Europe, and some of the biggest broadcasters in the country as well. And this was the final thing for me 2 months ago, as we took the company public, and we launched ourselves on the New York Stock Exchange. So with that, maybe just a little bit of an introduction to what I think is the environment that we start to face in tech. And I think I have to do this. Not that. How do I get out of that?
You reach the point where you're into it. On one hand, you have in your mind you have to move fast. But on the other hand, you know exactly if I do a mistake, I fall off.
So obviously, north face the Eiger. What's that got to do with anything? Well, I'll come to that in a minute. But for those who don't know, north face the Eiger, 1,800 meters of vertical climb. First climbed in 1943 by Heinrich Harrer. Was never climbed in winter until 1983. It was the first winter ascent. It took 13 days. This was an ascent in winter, 2 hours, 47 minutes, by a guy called Uli Steck. So what changed? Well, what changed in recent history is the world changed, the weather changed. Nobody in the right mind would climb the north face of the Eiger in summer anymore because it's a constant sheet of falling rock, falling ice, and it's only in the winter that you actually get the opportunity to go and then climb on consolidated ice and snow. And the other thing that changed, the technology changed. So in the early days when you climbed, you actually had to hack steps and step up, and the prevailing thought of the time was to carry huge amounts of equipment, lots of ropes, lots of protection, plan for failure, plan for falling off. And they did all of that. In the modern times, even in the winter, the biggest risk is to stay on the face for long periods of time. So the faster you can ascend, the faster you can get off it, then the more likely you are to achieve the objective and reach the top. So it's almost that inversion of logic that says you do away with the ropes, so hopefully you spotted that, no ropes. This ascent involved no use of any fixed equipment on the face, and it's the first one to ever do that. And you saw some of that exposure. I love the way he said that, if I make a mistake, I fall off, and then promptly his ice axe slips on that little placement. So what's that got to do with us? Well, it's interesting because we're in a phase of business now that has changed radically. We go through changes every 10 years or so. We're in a phase that has changed radically. And the way that our customers and the way that our employees interact with us as companies is radically different. And that has been, it's been underpinned to some extent with technology. So when I come to think about setting up a business, I just want to give you a couple of things that I think about that you really need to think about as you're setting up. So the first one has always been true. You need to know your business. And that sounds like a really obvious statement, but in kind of companies that we operate in, or we're serving companies that are trying to change very rapidly, knowing your business becomes a real art form. In the old days, when I ran a couple of businesses and we brought them to Europe, it was about really looking and saying, oh, the market's slightly different, we'll adapt. So when we brought Clarify over to Europe, it was about changing what was a technical support system into being a telecom system, and that's part of what drove the growth of the company. Now, if I look at the way that we in Box interact with our customers, I can't even keep track of the number of different ways in which our customers use our product. And so that need to stay in constant touch and constantly reinvent the product becomes a real need. And when you're deploying it and when you have conversations with customers, quite often what you go and you think you sold to the customer is not actually what they do with the system at all. So number one is to know your business, and that increasingly becomes getting close to the customer and staying close to the customer in all the changes they move through. So tip number two, I think, is too often we plan for failure. The quote from Uli Steck there was, I want to go fast, but if I make a mistake, I fall off. But then it didn't stop him going on to climb without the ropes. He just did it in a very calculated way. And when we set up our businesses quite often, I think we plan for failure. And I think that the mindset that you have to have is really of one of, what is it I'm going to do differently? I had a conversation with the CIO over at Gatwick Airport recently, and he was talking about passenger information systems. So this is one of our customers talking about his business. And he said, common logic would be that your passenger information system, you want to keep close to you, you want to keep it on site, and you want to be able to manage it very closely because of security risks. When the airport flooded the Christmas before last, and you've got your passenger information systems on site, that doesn't do you a lot of good. So the very day that you've got a problem on site, you've lost all information for your passengers. So that logic of saying, let's keep it close, gets inverted, and he's in the mode of pushing it out into the cloud where you have triple backup, and it really doesn't matter which sites go down. So our customers' businesses are evolving, and we have to be planning and building in that way. When we set the business up here for Box, this is one of the things that we thought about. There were a lot of things around common logic of how you might set up your back office and where you might put it. We were very intensely focused on, let's get where we want to be by our customers, in the place that our customers are going to be, and then build our business based on that, because speed is everything in a business that is growing as fast as ours is. And I think the other thing that I see sometimes from some colleagues is, there is a boldness that we see coming out of Silicon Valley when they build businesses. We need to do more of that when we set up our businesses on this side of the world. The other thing I learned a long time ago was when you build teams, the sheer danger of building a team in your own image is huge. One of the things I've done with the team that we built here is really to try and get them to be self-aware from day one. I want them to understand themselves. I want them to understand how they interact with other people and the different types of people that you would want in a business. And how do you make the best use of folks in that way? One of my earliest management jobs I had, I worked with a team, and we were just full of bold ideas. We came out and we started loads of stuff. We never got anything finished. And then we did a Myers-Briggs, the first time I'd ever come across it in my career. And we kind of looked at it, and guess what? We were all the same people. We were all, super red directors and driving stuff out. In subsequent years, I've done exercises with teams when I've taken them over, and companies will charge you thousands of pounds to do this. But actually, the simplest exercise I ever did was to base 100 of my top managers at Heathrow Airport hotel, and just say, look, you've got a task for an hour. It's a time-based task because that's the type of businesses we work in. You must complete, here's the definition of completion, and you're in 10 teams. So 100 managers, 10 teams. You've got to go and construct yourself a survey, and you must have 100 participants in that survey, and completion of the task looks like that you present back here with a completed presentation. And by the way, there are 10 taxis outside the hotel, and nobody who's responding to the survey can be within 5 miles of the hotel. So we kind of just stood back and you look at the chaos. So because the teams run for the door, and you've got the inevitable team that takes 2 or 3 cabs and just heads out, haven't really thought about what they're doing and all the rest of it. And then we ended up with the one team left that was sitting in the corner going, let's think about this. And the conclusion they came to was, it was the year before the World Cup, let's just have a survey that says who's going to win the World Cup. No one defined how complex the survey had to be. No one defined that it had to be, intellectual, and that's what they did. And then they figured out, actually, the hotel we were in was at least 5 miles from our office, and there were 250 people in the office, and they all had mobile phones. So they tackled the problem completely differently. They were the first group to finish, and it was that different thinking that really drove them in a different direction. Of course, the most complete task, or the most complete way to finish that task, was to have all 100 people make one phone call each, and no one go anywhere, because no one said they had to be in the teams. But it's that diversity of thinking that you need in the business. And as you set up your business, you really want to be able to have access to talent that is both diverse in terms of gender, diverse in terms of the way people think, so the character types, but also, for me, diverse in terms of nationality. I run an international business. I want to have context on the business, and I want to have a way of understanding what's happening in the new offices we're going to be setting up. HP did that wonderfully well when I was there. We never had a management meeting in the same place. I had less than I had 2 managers in the UK. The rest of my European team was dispersed across the geography, and it really got people to think. But you want to be able to have that talent and access to that talent when you build out. And then the other thing that I think when you set up in the first place is to be able to use this horrible expression, leverage your network. And in the old days for me, that was all about looking up the black book and then figuring out how I could get someone to get us in front of people and then pitch. For us, as we've set up this business, because what we're trying to do is work with companies and help them to really change the way they do things, to innovate and to be disruptive. What I really mean by that network is our customers. The most valuable thing to me is our customers, and being able to get our customers to get together with non-customers and just listen. I do far more listening these days, because back to the original discussion, you've got to know what your customers really want to do and what they're doing with your product. And so you start to hear these challenges that these companies are facing in terms of changing the business. So when you look at people like Eurostar, one of the biggest challenges they face really is, and the CIO was saying it to us recently, is to not plan for failure. We've got to change that mentality. We've got to plan for success, and we've got to complete things faster. And so how can we help them go and complete that? So this leveraging the network for me now, one of the things we've done in the last 9 months is meet with 800 CIOs in different businesses. And we've done it right here in London, just over a series of dinners. And the very different thing this time around is very often we don't speak at all. We just facilitate the dinner, we put it in place, we don't pitch, and we just let them talk. And that's one of the most powerful tools that we've found in getting our business set up and really understanding the next set of challenges we want to go after. Actually, the really interesting thing is, of course, we get asked, well, why are you here? Tell us what you do for us. And usually one of our customers will answer it, not us, which is fantastic. So what's all that got to do with setting up a business here in London? Well, I think the final piece of that is, if you look at the challenges, if you really want to be able to help people disrupt the business, if you want to be able to change the way people think, you want to be close to the customers, you've got to come up with new ways of doing that. And when we originally set up, I don't think I really had thought through, do we want to be in London or somewhere else? When we actually looked at our business, it became blinding obvious that we had to base ourselves here. And for some very obvious reasons, a lot of our customer base that we wanted to reach was here, or passes through London on a regular basis, or is attracted to be in London for various events. And so it became obvious from that perspective. But one of the things we didn't expect that has started to happen, has become very interesting, is some of our customers go on holiday to London, and they come and visit us. It's unbelievable. We actually have customers that show up in our office with their kids. And we have the kids go play on the PlayStation, and we have a chat with them. We get a different type of dialogue with customers when they do that. And they're coming here because it's an attractive place to be. So it's an attractive place for people to come on a business perspective, but we also see people passing through as well. If you think about then really from a talent base, I said already, I need a really diverse talent base. Again, I've set up businesses before. I put a couple of hundred jobs into Ireland in my last job. Previous to that, we had at Nortel, we had 2,500 people in Ireland. One of the most obvious things was to go and put the service base in Ireland from day one and get that set up. Again, back to speed. We needed to be quick on getting to market and getting going. And I was challenged by the board to say, go look at this because everyone else seems to do it. But when we looked at actually getting access to talent and building a team, we hired best part of 100 people in, I would say, just over 9 months. And we were looking for languages all the way from, obviously English through Russian, through Spanish, through Italian, Arabic. And we were looking for a broad talent base. What we found was not only were people here in London, but we could attract people to move to London. And that is very different to putting your center elsewhere. So rather than dividing and spending energy in 2 different places, we got our base here. We got that early stage sharing of knowledge in one office, in one location, and we're able to build out on that basis. And then the other thing we found really around the community that we were trying to build is that we also find senior execs are prepared to come and spend time with us here as well. They will always find a reason to be in London. And so they're coming and spending time. We have those, a number of CI dinners, as I mentioned. We often get people in from Italy, from Spain, across Europe, who will fly in very specifically for those occasions. Why? Because they're coming to be with like-minded people who are sharing problems and challenges of their business and the way in which they can tackle them. So for us, London's been an ideal location, really because it supports our business needs. It supports our ability to get after the business. And I think increasingly we're starting to see that the community here is becoming much stronger. If you look at Silicon Valley and the way it's built, I've spent probably best part of 30 years flying back and forth with different jobs into Silicon Valley. You look at the community there, and you look how tight it is. You drive down 101, you can literally meet the industry at a very short space of distance. And even in the places you would meet socially, you will meet with people from the business. I had an offsite recently just in Andreessen Horowitz, and I do that sometimes when I'm over there, and it's great, because there's just tons of people flow through the office, and just in the hallways, you meet people that can be useful and speak together. When you build communities like that, people understand their business better. And when you talk about taking risks, you start to get that alternative thinking. So that ability to say, let's not look at getting up the Eiger with all these ropes and all that stuff. Let's take the risks appropriate to the business, because actually what we're trying to get done is to drive with speed and with pace. And I see a community now coming together in London of people who've been through the first generation of this and the second generation, and you're seeing that bolder level of investment. For us as a business, we have a fairly bold investment model. We've invested, ahead of the curve. We took $500 million in funding before we went public, and we did that because we have a market where our customers need us to move fast, and that market was developing very quickly. As you set up your businesses in London, you now have a community of people who are starting to understand that and start to build it out. And so I think you end up with really the ideal location here, and it's been that for us as we set the business up. And I look forward to even greater things around that, because the community is constantly getting bigger. I'm looking at some of the big expansions here as Google moves in and puts the buildings in here. We have a much, much bigger tech community that we can draw on, and that alone will give us momentum. And I think that's something that you really have to consider when looking at the business. So I guess the question really is, as you start to look at setting up, are you going to get that alternative thinking, and are you going to get to really driving what your customers need? And are you going to look at different ways of doing things? Because that's what generally, if we're in tech, our customers need to do. So I put forward that London is probably the best place. From a corporate perspective, I have to say, in the early days, I had some challenges around why would you do it this way. It's paid back 100-fold for us in terms of both visibility, the team we've been able to build, and then our ability to go and get to our customers and attract them to events. So I don't know whether that's helpful. I have tried to tackle a little bit of a different way, and at the climbing, by the way, the picture on the second climbing was me on top of Mont Blanc, just in case it was of any interest, and it was about -30, and I was sick as a dog. So I don't know if there's any questions around that. It's, I tried to take a line on it, but any questions that anyone would have, or? One down here.
You don't see, when it comes to keeping the talents, you don't see a problem with the high living costs in London? It's very expensive to buy something and so on.
Yeah, it is expensive in London, but it's expensive, in Barcelona. It's expensive in many other cities you would think about putting talent. And that's always been the discussion when when one place gets hot. When Dublin got hot, that was the discussion. No, I don't think so. I think we're in a business that is growing very rapidly. We will see people leave and move on to different jobs. Part of what we like about the business is we also have an ability to bring fresh talent in. So, we work on the basis that you will see people develop and move elsewhere, but we'll also benefit from everybody else's folks as well. So I think it has a self-leveling effect, and I think that will be, I think it will work out just fine. Actually, most of our folks are so delighted to be in and around the city and working here that they find ways of living, and they're living together, many of them. So that you'll see people take houses together, and then obviously go on and graduate to bigger properties as they go on. So no, I don't think so. A follow-up question?
If your talents are young people, they can live like that for a couple of years, but if they want to create an own life with a family, yep. I think London is a very difficult place to create something, a good life. Yeah, and I see that as a real problem for if you want to find and keep good talents.
So I think what we're finding is we actually have a split base. So we almost have I'm the old group, so I'm certainly on the older side of the company, and we do have probably, I'd say probably 30 to 35% of the companies, you know, late 30s, 40s kind of age group. And then we have quite a talent base that's around the, you know, high 20s, early 30s. I think it will be like it's always been in London. I think people will then choose either to be located outside and travel in. The links are good and are getting increasingly good. I think as Crossrail starts to kick in a couple of years, it'll be, you know, even better. But there's, you know, the commuting is very easy as well. So people will move out if they want bigger properties and they want to move elsewhere. So I think we still see that, and we still have people commuting. I just hired someone to run legal for me. We brought her in from Munich. She's actually going to locate in Oxford for schools, but she will be based in London. So I don't see that as a problem. There's one over here.
Hi, I've got a software company from out of town. Basically, we're looking at collaborative entrepreneurship using online means, Skype and what have you, and Cisco. Do you see a role for that? I mean, we're finding the development community is starting to become multinational via Skype, via these means of communication, without actually physically being in London or being in Barcelona or whatever. Some people are, we just talk to them on the phone or talk to them on Skype. Yep. Do you not see that undermining this coalescing around London? Do you not see there's a tension there? Well,
part of our solution for our customers is we actually have a collaboration environment, so it's around the content. So we work with companies who are working around the globe and might be designing in, you know, Amsterdam or approving in Liverpool and, you know, rolling out in Rio or something like that. So there is a role for that type of thing. But I think when you look at building, when you see communities building and building momentum, I think you see a number of areas around the world that you use as benchmarks and say that there will be a momentum center, and that will drive. So you would see Silicon Valley, I think you would see Tel Aviv and places like that where they've sprung up, and it's that drives on. So you will see constant innovation out of Tel Aviv, and you'll see, you know, Silicon Valley, and I think London is really getting to be the early stages on that path. So I think that will be the natural thing. So yes, there'll be online collaboration, but there are times when you want to be in a room with someone and express an idea, and that's still, we're human beings at the end of the day, and that works well.
Hello, I'm interested in what kind of psychological tools do you use, and if you can outline some of them, to push your team when you're in a crisis situation.
So that's an interesting one. I mean, there's so much research on psychological tools, on hiring, and, you know, you look at, you know, some of the companies in this industry with, you know, Google with their models for hiring and those kind of things. What I like with tools is if they're simple and people understand them. And so I think if they're not operational and not easy to remember, you'll never get them into the business, and people won't use them on a general basis. So I think one of the biggest things for me is that I want people to understand how they behave under pressure. And that's probably one of the single biggest things. So, and there are tons of tools for that. The one I've rolled out in the company here and I've rolled out before is Insights. Insights is a color scheme for just looking at what's my primary behavior look like. And I love it because it actually has a color map and it has a circle, and you can put you on the color map and you can put the person you're talking to on it. And you can actually start to think about, how do I address them? And you can also start to think about, you know, if I'm trying to be flexible and work with them, then you put me under pressure, I'm going to be here. And I'm going to revert back to type and that kind of stuff. So I love that as a tool. And there's an extension to that of actually looking at, if I'm dealing with a type of customer, how should I behave, and, you know, what's the way to engage with them rather than my kind of values and that kind of thing. So that's probably one simple example. I'm not one for big analytical tools if you can't operationalize it.
I actually have two questions. In terms of the talent that you look to hire, what predominant color do you look for from the Insights wheel?
What type of talent do I look for predominantly?
Yeah, the predominant color that they have, or the main color.
I don't. And that's the whole point. So we don't do the analysis prior to hiring them. What I want actually is a diverse team. So we will look at a role and we'll look at the kind of, you know, the experience, we'll look at the kind of characteristics we would like. But I've actually, one of the biggest wake-up calls I had in my life, I had an enterprise leader actually who ran Greater Western Europe for me when I was at HP. and he was my most successful ever. So he built about $250 million business for me in that region. And I went through, and I'd worked with him for 3 years, and I believed I understood his character type. And when we actually did the analysis, he was completely different. And what he'd done was he actually learned his behavior, and he'd learned to master those tools and say, look, if I want to get this done, this is how I get it done. And it was that ability to move around that that is interesting, and just understand it and be self-aware. So I would never hire to the color type. I don't think that makes sense. I think there would be a natural selection that, you know, certain people are not interested in analytics, so they probably wouldn't go after an analytical job. So.
And one of the other questions I had was what some of the challenges you face in London? Some
of the challenges we face in London. I'm gonna mention my inevitable one. In the early days, visas, right? I mean, and this is getting much better. We have a much better setup now, but in the very early stage of setting up a business here, just being able to pull talent from where you want can be sometimes a challenge. So I think that was the one. Really, I can't think of anything other than that that really, you know, challenges us. I think we've seen more opportunity than challenge. We have just the style of business is more of a, I was going to say family. It is a little bit like that. It is amazing the amounts of things that the company do together. There's an expectation that we would engage, certainly from the types of people we're hiring, that we would engage much broader on, you know, things that we'd be involved in. Obviously, social, you know, interaction of various types, and taking on some of those challenges and supporting people in doing it. I think. Certainly for the younger population, we've got much more flexible in the way that we expect family life to work and that kind of thing as well. So,
I apologize, but I need some answers. In this community of high-level executives, is the quality of the interaction between them and the information exchange growing or stabilizing? The quality, not quantity. We're interested in if they are really talking or if they are trying to avoid these kind of contacts.
I think my sense is the majority of the times that we are involved in the communities, they typically are looking for solutions. So they're looking for, you know, we have a challenge that we want to, you know, move the business forward in this area or that area, and I think they're sharing information on a much broader basis. We try and promote that as much as we can, and as I say, much more around what people are doing. So you would see people like, you know, Michael Ibbotson would maybe lead one of those events for us. He's over at Gatwick Airport, and just challenge people around how do you think about what you do. So his, you know, whole thing at the last event was really around information and what you do with the information. And his whole thing was how do you make the experience in the airport different, and, you know, making mobiles a travel information system. There's no reason why you should even have boards in the airport. You know, you push it all to the mobile. You know where you are. You've got Google Maps, so you can map you on the map. There's your gate, here's how you get to the gate, and they've just launched that with EasyJet, I think, in the airport. So you see them tackling, you know, solutions like that, and then sharing other kind of challenges that they have. So those have been very good. I mean, clearly there are groups that are entrenched in sort of older views, but I think that's getting less, because I think the need in the business, and the needs in business generally for IT professionals, is that you help innovate in the business, or we'll work around you. And I think that's been led by the change of user kind of mentality. In businesses today, if you're not being relevant, you get left aside. And you'll see all these tools come into your business that you just, you know, will go a different way. So, okay. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully it was useful.